Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm John and I'm not so odd. In today's video, I wanted to talk about something near and dear to my heart, Fire Emblem Three Houses on the Switch. Particularly today, I wanted to talk about Cyril, a character who everyone hates. Well, some people really hate him, some people really love him. It depends on who you're asking. But let's get into it. Let's talk about Cyril. And today I'm going to be comparing him to other units in his canon classes, and I'm going to be comparing three things in particular. I'm going to be comparing stats to start with, and then we're going to go into arts, and lastly, skills. So the reason I said his canon classes is because in Crimson Flower, if you don't, well, I was going to say if you don't recruit him, but you can't recruit him in Crimson Flower. So in Crimson Flower, he joins Rhea's side, and he's going to be a flyer. He's going to be a Wyvern Rider, because that's the only male flyer available. So that's why I chose to compare him to flyers. Also, if you look at his growths right off the bat compared to all of our female flyers here, like you'll notice his growths are pretty damn close to what theirs are, if not identical. And then I'm comparing him to archers on the second page over here, and that's because his second canon class, if you do recruit him, is archer. That's what his canon time skip clothing is reflective of, the fact that he's either an archer or a sniper when he rejoins you with the church. Yeah, so let's look at his growths right away, and his growths and his bases, because that's how his stats break down. It's growths and bases. So his growths are really good, as you can see. Like, let's look at his offensive spread, his strength, and his speed growth. And pretty much every female flyer here, and the reason I'm including Leone in this is because she's typically the character in the Golden Deer who you flex in to be a flyer, because your other choices are Leone and Claude. Marianne and Claude. And Claude is a lord. We're not trying to compare Cyril to a lord because that wouldn't be fair. And Marianne is typically your physic healer, so you wouldn't be doing that either. So Leone, that kind of leaves Leone, and very often Leone is that character who you use to fill in whatever spot you need to on the team, and having her as a flyer is always a great option. Right away you can see that strength growth is identical straight across the board, with the exception of Ingrid, who is has 5% less, but that's not that big a deal. If you look at their speed, everyone has a 60 speed growth. And then if you look at their defensive stats, everyone has kind of lackluster defenses. Cyril matches Petra and Ingrid for 30%. And when it comes to Leone is actually 10 points ahead. Yeah, so then let's look at resistance last. Cyril actually has a decent resistant growth of 30, which is better than Petra's and Leone's, which clocks in at 15, and Ingrid's is way better, coming in at 40. And Ingrid also has a better base of resistance in 8, which is really good. Alright, now let's look at his bases, and I feel like this is where he fails completely. His bases are pretty trash compared to everyone else's. He has a 7 base of strength, and this is at level 1. All of these bases are at level 1. I have it written at the bottom there. All bases at level 1. So at level 1, Cyril has 7 strength, which is very trash, and then 6 speed, which is also very trash. Especially if you compare that to someone like Petra, who has 9 strength at level 1 and 10 speed. So right off the bat, Petra's doing way better than Cyril is. And then Leone has 2 9s, and then Ingrid has 8 for strength and 8 for speed. So she's only doing 1 better than Cyril in terms of strength, and 2 better in terms of speed. So her speed is definitely ahead of his, and if their speed growth is identical, like in a vacuum, I guess, like Cyril would never catch up to Ingrid's speed, especially if you consider the things that like Ingrid has access to Pegasus Knight, and so does Petra and Leone, which is going to give them a plus 10 speed growth, bringing them up to a 70% speed growth, which is definitely higher than 60 for Cyril. But yeah, like you can see that pretty much all of Cyril's bases are behind theirs in the stats that actually matter. The only place Cyril's identical with them is defense. Defense, he has Petra and Ingrid matched. Leone's comes in higher at 7. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess that's all I can draw to. Oh, and he also has really, really bad charm. He has 4 for charm. So he's way behind on a lot of his stats, which is definitely something that holds him back. So you can see that his growths are really amazing, and which is, again, almost identical to all the flyers. And then his bases are just bad, just really poor bases. Now let's compare his growths and his bases to that of archers, and it's weird because he actually comes in a little closer to archers than he does to flyers. So he has 7 strength, which is only 1 behind every single person here in terms of his base strength. And then for speed, he is 1 behind Bernadetta, 2 behind Ignatz, and a whopping 3 behind Ash. So Ash is definitely doing better in terms of speed. In terms of their strength growth, though, Cyril is 5 points ahead. So if you actually So that means every 10 levels, Cyril will be getting 4 attack. So by level 21, Cyril will have 8 more attack, which will balance him out with at a level 21 Bernadetta, Ash, or Ignatz, which will have by in a vacuum they would get 3.5 every 10 levels, so they'd be at 7 plus. So they'd all be at 15 not attack. They'd all be at 15 strength at level 21 if this was like in a vacuum in a perfect world type situation where growth dictated exactly what stats were gonna be. So yeah, by that definition, I guess like Cyril technically would catch up with the strength of all of these characters in another 20 levels, and then by everything beyond that, Cyril will have one up on these guys. Every other 20 levels, Cyril will go beyond them. So by level 40, he'll be 1 strength more than them. But that isn't saying much because level 1 through 20, anything could happen, and also you can get RNG screwed, RNG blessed with any of these characters. And looking at speed again, just like Ash is 3 points ahead in terms of speed, so that's going to make a very big deal, especially in the opening chapters. That's the difference of, you're not very likely to double in Maddening, however, and again, I'm just going to be using Maddening as the base for this. You're not very likely to double in Maddening with 9 speed, but 9 speed can prevent you from being doubled, and that's something very useful, with the exception of those very, very speedy Myrmidons that are clocking in with like 15, 16, occasionally 20 speed in those early chapters, which is devastating. But yeah, like in terms of growths, Cyril has every single character here beat, except in the resistance department, I want to say. Yeah, in terms of resistance, that's the only place where Cyril has worse stats than has a worse growth than anyone, and he's gonna be 5% worse than Ignatz and Ash. But everything else in the whole, I still have that mistake over here that says he has 25 growth on charisma. He actually has 35 growth on not charisma, charm. God, Dungeons and Dragons, you're so used to reading that as charisma. Anyway, yeah. So in terms of all of his growths, like Cyril is actually superior to all of the archers in every area, like straight across the board, with the exception of resistance again, which is impressive to see. By that logic alone, if we were just looking at growths and just saying, hey, Cyril's growths, what are they? Cyril has better growths than every other archer out there. And again, his bases are lower than everyone else's in terms of the stats that actually matter, in terms of those offensive stats, because you're not really using anyone defensive here, but it's like, I guess it's, yeah, it's really up to you how you use him. So yeah, straight across the board, you can see that Cyril's stats are not as good as theirs in terms of base stats. And in terms of growth, he is better, but that isn't saying much, because in order to play catch up with archer stats, he would have to power level him to 20 levels to be at the point where he is better than them. Versus if you started the game and you're already invested in Bernadetta, Ash, and Ignatz, like, you're not going to want to invest in another archer. Well, I mean, you might want to, because archers are very useful in Maddening mode, but God, it's just it's a tough call to make, especially if you really enjoy these characters and they're your favorites. It's hard to make the argument that you should invest in Cyril. But the next section is going to cover that, one of the reason you should use Cyril, and that's going to be combat arts. So in terms of combat arts, Cyril actually gets point blank volley very early at C+, which is interesting because he actually comes in at level 5. So when Byleth is level 10, by chapter 5, you can recruit Cyril, and he will be level 5 if Byleth is level 10, because you need to be at least level 10 to recruit Cyril. So he's coming in with a C rank in bows, so it's not too hard to get him to C+, and then secure the point blank volley, which is going to be a very useful skill. It gives him, I want to say, 4 extra might. Let's find point blank volley really quick on this page. So it's giving him, 3 extra might and 10 extra hit, which is good. And it has 1 range, but it hits twice, and to get something that hits twice that early is really, really good. He can definitely finish off some chipped enemies. So like if you have an archer like Bernadetta or Ignatz like chip down someone, he can come in from the front and just cleave away with that point blank volley damage, which is really nice. So it's gonna be a really useful finisher, especially early game, and especially if you can, there's my dog. Especially if you can get him Death Blow, because if you can get him Death Blow and he has Point Blank Volley, you're getting an extra 6 damage plus the extra 3 damage from Point Blank Volley at 1 range, and that's really amazing to hit twice at 1 range with Death Blow. That's going to be really his saving grace here. No one else gets Point Blank Volley in the game with the exception of Leonie, and yeah, she's pretty much it. That's the only person who gets Point Blank Volley. Bernadetta has Enclosure, which is a really good skill. Deadeye is really not that great. Like, you really need to have that plus 20 hit from Archer class, like that, which is a very useful skill to have. But yeah, just Deadeye is just not as good as we thought it was going to be when it got included in this game. We all thought it was going to be amazing, but Deadeye is just not that great. Enclosures, I want to say Enclosure and Vengeance are Bernadetta's two best selling points. So there's a lot of Vengeance tactics you can use where you get her down to a really low HP and she just runs around. Like you warp her around the map and she just vengeances into the boss for lethal damage. And Cyril can also do that. Cyril actually gets Vengeance at Sea Lances as well, so it's also very easy to get him into a Vengeance build if you want to do that with him as well. So here he can do two of the best things in the game, which is A, Vengeance, which is something people love doing with Bernadetta, and B, Point Blank Volley, which is a really amazing combat art. So in terms of combat art, Cyril is actually very stacked, so he actually has two great things going for him. So in terms of combat arts, like Petra doesn't have a lot of great combat arts. You're going to have to go into swords to get her an A in swords, to get Finesse Blade. The Bane of Monster abilities and like all the monster damaging abilities I think are okay, but they're conditional. You only want to use them when there are monsters around in a chapter, which in some routes happens more than others, but it's just like it's very conditional. Wild Abandon is not a great combat art, neither is Diamond Axe. Waning Shot is actually okay because it gives a minus 5 to strength. Let me double check that. Waning Shot. Sorry, this is the new website that I think Mecha or Mangs. I want to say Mangs was promoting it really hard. Said it was really good, and it actually really is. It's just fe3h.com. So yeah, Waning Shot, which gives minus 5 strength, is actually pretty useful because that could potentially prevent lethal damage. So on Petra, that Waning Shot that comes in at C+ is actually pretty useful, especially early game as well. Petra and Leonie both have proficiency in bows, so if you decide to train them as archers as well, they can also make killer archers. So I guess again, this is like this is more fodder for like or more just like more in the case defense of why you should be using Petra over Cyril, because Petra has Waning Shot, and if there's an enemy you can't kill in a single turn and they're going to attack one of your squishy units, you have Waning Shot to give them minus 5 strength, which is going to be, if they're hitting a squishy twice, that's minus 10 damage ultimately, which can be the difference in a life or death situation. So like that's actually pretty useful for Petra to have, especially in Maddening, which is... So I'm going to give credence to Waning Shot over here for Petra. Obviously, it'd be better to use Point Blank Volley with Cyril and completely eliminate the threat as opposed to just weakening it so it can't kill one of your squishy units. But at the same time, I feel like Waning Shot undoubtedly has some use, especially in Maddening, where you just cannot kill everything all the time, like reliably. Ingrid's going to have, I guess, her specials are Hexblade, Frozen Lance, and Hit and Run, but Frozen Lance and Hexblade are her, I want to say, her two better things because they're hitting on resistance as opposed to defense, which is really good, but she's not getting those until A. Leonie, again, she gets Point Blank Volley, but not until A rank. Yeah, she gets Lance Jab, she gets Monster Piercer, Break Shot. Break Shot gives minus defense, I want to say. Let me double check again. Yeah, minus 5 defense, which is good for monsters and things like that, has its uses. Yeah, I guess you could make an argument for Leonie as well to be in the archer classes. And obviously, just like Petra, she has a proficiency in bows, so taking her down the archer path is also a good idea. So this is someone else you can use for utility as opposed to Cyril. But again, Point Blank Volley with Death Blow is just going to be so clutch. Early game especially, just to wipe things off the board. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. So combat arts, just like Cyril, his two saving graces, Point Blank Volley and Vengeance. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is skills. The problem with Cyril's skills is the fact that Aptitude is his skill, and while it fixes his abysmal growth rates to really good growth rates, it doesn't give him any extra edge over anyone else. Everyone else has a skill that besides their good growths. So Petra, on top of her good growths, has Hunter's Boon, which is decent. It gives her plus 20 to crit if the foe is under 50% health. Lady Knight gives Ingrid gives her more damage and more accuracy while using gambits. Rivalry makes Leonie take 2 less damage and deal 2 more damage when she's next to a male ally. When she has a male ally adjacent. Oh, I misspelled Aptitude on Cyril right here. LOL, Aptitude. Just noticed that. Wow, all these typos I had in here. Bernadetta has persecution complex, which gives her, I think, +5 to damage when she's less than 100% HP. Lockpick on Ashe is really trash, so I guess you can make that that argument and say that, hey, Cyril is on par with or better than Ashe in that regard. And then you have Ignatz, which has Watchful Eye, and Watchful Eye is a +20 to hit, which is just really good overall. So it really comes down to these three things, and I think all of these things make Cyril an okay unit. To answer that question, is Cyril a good unit? It's like, yeah, he's good. He's okay. He's not the best, but he's definitely not the worst. Again, great growths, bad bases. Personal skill is lackluster because it's not really giving him anything special. Like, and again, I guess it all comes down to aptitude. Like, he really could be this whole thing could be fixed if they made aptitude better, gave him, you know, like better growths with aptitude, like that brought him up to really, really amazing stat growths, or if they just added an extra skill along with aptitude, or made aptitude do something more than just increased his stat growths. He's a good unit. He's not the best, he's not the worst. And in the argument of point blank volley, you don't need to be someone who uses Cyril expressly for the purpose of point blank volley. If you like him, go and use him, and then by no means is he a bad unit. Again, the worst thing about him is his bases and the fact that aptitude is egregiously absorbing his skill slot. That's pretty much it for the day. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you like Cyril? Do you hate him? Do you think he's the worst? Do you think he's fixable? And yeah, based on what I've shown you about his stats today, because a big thing people complained about were his growths, like based on the added up calculation, you can see that he's almost identical to some of the really great characters like Ingrid and Petra and Leonie. Like, do you think he's better now based on looking at what his growths are with aptitude? So again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.